we are at our theme time. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. I've already offered a few words of introduction for Bruce Reyes Chow. If you wish to read about Bruce, you can turn to page 10 in your workbook, or you can Google his name and find out all kinds of wonderful and intriguing things. So I turn this point in our agenda over to Bruce, and once again just to say how delighted we are to have you with us, Bruce.
Great, thank you. All right. All right, well, it is good to be with you all. And first, thank everybody who's been involved in the hospitality here. It's funny, you know, when you come from away and you land in a place, there's always people that love going where I'm going to, or maybe grumble where I'm going to, and I've heard both kind of saying, we're going all the way out to Swan River, and I'm like, well, that looks great. I love to go out. When they asked me if I could come, you know, I kind of knew it's Canada, and that's about it. So I'm like, sure, why not? I'll go to Canada, and then as I got closer and closer, people kind of telling me, do you know where that is? And then, you know, but hey, you know, I love an adventure. I think one of the great things about the world today is that we are connected to each other beyond geography. And so as I sit with you and I've shared with these portions of your meetings, it feels a lot like home. I'll tell a little bit about myself in a minute, but, you know, sitting at a gathering of denominational people, I'm not sure I would go as far as saying it's really cool, but it is, right? You kind of get together. It's a family reunion. It's a good time to just be clearly who we are and who you've grown up to be. And so I've enjoyed sitting here and being part of your time. I also want to say that the president and executive reports were probably two of the most trenchant and well-done reports I have heard at any denominational meeting. So kudos to you all. Because when you started, I'm like, oh, good Lord, we're not going to get out of here until like forever, but we were done. All right, so before I start, let's begin with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Holy and gracious God, for the Spirit that is in this place, the Spirit that has gathered us here with expectations and hopes, some anxiety, but a Spirit that has gathered us here for a particular purpose at this particular time in this particular place. We ask you open up our hearts, our minds, our spirits, and our souls so that we may discover what that is. We thank you for this gathering and for all who have made this possible. We pray all this in the name of Christ, and all God's people say, amen. All right, if we just go ahead and start the slides, that would be awesome. All right, so I took this picture yesterday of the swan, and I posted out on all my stuff. I said, there is at least one big old swan in this city. So one of my friends said, I want to see a picture of you riding that swan later. And I'm like, I don't feel like I want to get arrested on this trip. So it is good to be with you. I'm a big believer in introducing your context and understanding who you are. And so I want to talk a little bit and let you know a little bit about who I am. It's always a strange thing. You never know what people expect or of you. I always tell people when they're going to come hear me talk or I'm going to do anything, if we all set our expectations really low, then it's great at the end of the day. So, but let me tell you a little bit about myself. I think is helpful. This is my grandfather, Reyes Chow. He came to the United States in the 40s. I'm going to make the assumption none of you are Asian American Studies majors in college. I'm just going to assume that. But I majored in Asian American Studies, religion, and sociology. And one of the things that is part of our history in the U.S. is when the Chinese built the railroads in the United States, as they worked here, after the U.S. was done with them, we started this thing called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which meant that no more Chinese could immigrate to the U.S., so none. But while the railroads were being built, there were, of course, people born here of Chinese ancestry, born in the U.S., so they were U.S. citizens. So they would go back to China and spend 10 years there. Then they would come back to the U.S. and tell the U.S. government, while I was in China, I had 10 sons, right? And the U.S. government would say, okay. And, right, so those would give them all names, and then back in China, those identities would be sold. And my grandfather bought one of those. His mother bought one of those. And so when he came to the U.S., he came under the name Fong. And so for the first, up until about 4th grade, my dad was a Fong. And then the United States government offered amnesty to anybody who came over. This is a thing called being a paper son. You came over, you bought an identity, you bought a book from a family, and you memorized everything about that family, and then you got interviewed and let in under this other name. And the government said, we'll give you amnesty, you can reclaim your name back. And so, and my dad was, I think, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I remember exactly what year, my grandfather reclaimed their name of Chows. And so one day they were Fongs, and the next day they were Chows. And so there's your little bit of Asian American studies in your world today. But that's part of my background, is I come from an immigrant family. I'm 3rd generation Filipino. This afternoon I'll talk, or Chinese, I'll just talk about my Filipino side this afternoon. I'm a kid of the 80s. If you can't tell by the big puffy white jacket, any of you Wham fans out there? So this is me. I went to high school in Sacramento, California. I'm an Xer. I was born in 1969. The high school there, that's Craig Parker, a good friend of mine. We both had Letterman jackets, but our Letterman jackets, they weren't for athletics. They said academics on them because they gave academic letters there. But we wore them like we were jocks on campus and everything. It was great. So I'm in the 80s. I was in that time in technology and social media and all those things where you went from typing classes to keyboarding classes, right? In that transition. So I kind of have grown up, and I'm going to talk about some technology things this morning during all that time. But I'm a big 80s kid. That's my generational reality. I'm married. Robin is my wife. They're all the way on the right. We've been married. It'll be 24 years in December. I was engaged at 19, married at 21. My mother was not happy at all about that fact. But after the first grandkid, when a family is not happy about a marriage, and then you give them this beautiful grandchild, they're like, oh, we knew it would work the whole time. So I have 3 daughters. My oldest is 17. She's a junior in high school, so we're in the college process right now. And then Abigail is sitting next to me. She's in 7th grade and is a big soccer player. And then Annie between Robin and Evelyn there, she's almost 11. And she's in 5th grade. So we raise our kids. We're in San Francisco, California, and so they're raised in public schools there. So we have one in elementary, middle school, and high school at this point. I also, as you read in the bio, I was the moderator of the Presbyterian Church USA in 2008 to 2010. Now, I'm one of those that doesn't really care about office stuff. At the same time, I don't want to discount the fact that a denomination in the U.S., at that point, about 2 million members, elected an under 40 Asian American as their moderator. Because that is not something, when I walk places, I remember that there are many, many people who came before me that created this space and this opportunity in me and in our denomination to allow that to happen. And what it did, I think, was to help me and others in our church rethink about what it means not to be just Presbyterian, but what it means to be a person of faith that's involved in the denomination and doesn't look particularly like everybody would assume. When I would travel during my term as moderator, I'll never forget, when I went to Asia, there was a big thing, Bruce is going to go to Asia. He's an Asian moderator. We're going to send him to Asia. Great, whatever. But my handler at that point was a staff person, middle-aged white guy, David. He was wonderful, but almost every stop we got off, David would get off the bus first, and everyone would go, oh, Mr. Moderator, and David was like, it's not me. It's him. And I'd have to come down, and they'd be like, really? I'm like, you saw my picture when I was coming. It's not like this should be a shock, but anyway. So I do lift that up. It's important to say because I am one of those that believes in denominations. I am not one that says that the world is post-denominational. We are post-50s and 60s denominational, which is very different than saying there is no more validity to people gathering and organizing and having governance that holds itself together. So I am a denominational person. I'm going to keep going on that. There we go. I'm a pastor, if that on the slide, those words are coming over now. I pastored in San Francisco for about 18 years. I pastored a very traditional church early on my first call. Second call, I pastored a new church plant that was mostly our mantra was there will always be more 30s than 20s. There will always be more 40s than 30s. And we were intentional at the fact that we were going to create a culture that young adults wanted to be at. We weren't going to kick you out if you came in and you were 40 or 50, but you had to have a heart for that demographic. And my thinking was about this. There are plenty of places a person can go if they want older or multi-generational. But there are very few in our denomination where if they want progressive, Christ-centered, and young. And I think that was something that we helped to create. I need to go back to that real quick. All right, and so now what I do, I have this great season of life. I left the church that I helped to plant, and if any of you have ever been involved with church starts, the hardest transition is when the founding pastor leaves. And 3 years later, I'm so glad to say that church is thriving and doing really well. They called a new pastor right out of seminary, and when they called her, I told Robin, my wife, I said, the new pastor of Mission Bay, that was the church I was at, is about as old as we've been married. She's like, wow, you are old. I'm like, yeah, thanks, honey. But yeah, so they're doing really well. It's a very good transition for them. It was touch and go after the founding pastor leaves. But now, for those of you that have interacted with me online, I do a lot of online stuff. I can kind of consider myself an online chaplain and pastor with people. I don't get paid for that, but I spend a lot of time interacting with folks, with pastors and clergy. I do a lot of coaching with leadership for pastors and nonprofit leaders around social media and strategic planning. And then I blog, and I've written a couple books. And then I preach and speak everywhere, a lot of places. But my best thing that I love since I left the congregation is I'm home 4 days, usually in the middle of the week, and I get to be the stay-at-home dad and kind of be in the schools and soccer practices and all of that, and that is a great joy to me. If you read all that, that adds up to more than 5/5. So you get the problem with most of our lives these days. So that's a little bit about me. All right, so what we're going to do during our sessions, we have 3 times together. And the first session, I'm going to talk about social media a little bit. I am your quintessential Gen Xer and those who have had multiple careers. I think there's a time where we lament that, and we kind of say, gosh, I wish I could be with one thing for a long time. Some of us are trying to say, no, actually, this is a great gift. If we can figure out how to leverage that, because in many ways, with the way resources work and all those, we all need to know a lot about a lot of different things. And so I'm going to talk about social media this morning. This evening, I'm going to talk about race and diversity. It's something I'm passionate about. And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to talk about young adults and the future of denominations, especially because you all are going through some pretty interesting discernment around your future as a structure. I will say that my method of presenting are 2 things: drinking from a water hose and landing the plane, which means that I would rather have you go like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff, I'm only going to retain about 10%, 20%, and then go back and look at it, rather than have you go, oh, please make this end, right? I would much rather go, oh, here we go, let's keep you on your toes. But I also want to make sure that we land the plane. My preaching professor, which was so unique, J. Alfred Smith was my preaching professor, the person that was mentioned in this in the YouTube clip. He used to always talk about, at some point, preachers, we need to kind of take that plane off and look around the landscape. But if you don't land the plane and have that figure out what it means for our everyday life, then you're not a really good preacher. And so I believe that part of what we'll do is we'll land the plane. So I'm going to give you a lot of stuff, especially this morning, and then we'll land the plane. All right, moving on. So we're going to talk about social media and digital ministry and all of that. You can take notes if you want. You can tweet if you want. You can do whatever you want. But all these slides, when I get to a better Wi-Fi connection, I will upload them, and you can just write this little slideshare.net. That's going to flash throughout all of these slides, so you can write it down at some point. I will upload these all, and you can just download all of the slides I'll give you all this week. You can liberate them as you feel called. I'll put those all up in the next few days. By Monday evening, I'll have those up. So if you need to take notes just to stay awake, please do. your grocery list, all that stuff. I don't care. But just so you know, you don't have to try to follow everything because you might pass out. That's going to be a lot. All right, so here we go. 3 things you need to realize about social media. First is this. You will not keep up with everything. Okay? You will not keep up with everything. How many of you know what that is on my shirt? All right, so you're old like me, right? How many of you have no idea what that is on my shirt? Okay, now some of you are going to realize you do. If you're over 40, you're going to go, oh, I did know what that was. If you're under 30, you probably have no idea what this is, right? I walked out of my room one day, and my daughter, then about 15, tweeted out, Dad is wearing a shirt with a symbol of unknown origin. Right? She figured there's 3 prongs. Sure, it's some conference shirt he got somewhere, right? That's what she's thinking. So I put it on Facebook, of course, because that's what I do. And I said, say if you know it or not, and then how old you are. And kind of after 100 or so comments, it became clear at that point, it was like low 30s. If you were under 30, you didn't really know what it was, and over 30, with the prompt, you were like, oh, okay, now I remember what it is. All right, so some of you, someone that's over, who knows what that is, just say it. Anybody here? 45. Right, 45. So some of you remember actual records, right? The only reason my kids know records is because they melt them into art projects now. But, you know, that little spider went inside the 45 so you could put it on the record player, right? Some of you are going, oh, that's right. It's not that big, usually. I got this shirt as a sidebar. I got this shirt at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio. And it was the first month or so that the U2 concert was being shown there. They do a 45-minute 3D film concert of them. And my daughter, afterwards, she comes out and says, Dad, had you ever heard of U2 before? Yes, honey, I had heard of U2 before. All right, but that technology, it didn't get better. It didn't get more compact to stick in your pocket. It went away, right? There are people that never saw that, and it's okay. Your job as church workers and church folk is not to be on the leading edge of technology, right? That is not your job. I help you kind of think through that. It doesn't mean you can ignore it. We're not going to go that far, but it is not right. You don't have to know everything because, one, you are not going to. So just let yourself, some of this I'm going to give you today is going to be like, oh, okay, and others are like, yeah, I'm never going to do that. That's okay. All right, second thing you need to remember as we go into this social media stuff is this. You will not break the internet. Not that I don't think some of you are smart. My guess is that most of us don't have the dedication, I don't have the smarts to actually get in and break the internet. You may mess with your computer or your phone or your tablet or something, but you will not break the internet. I've worked with a lot of people like, well, if I do this, is this going to do something to, Google? No. It's not going to do anything to Google, right? So, just these are both kind of letting you just relax about all this technology that I'm going to throw at you in a minute, so you won't break the internet. And the last thing is this. God is never done asking you to do new things. So Abraham and Sarah were told, right? You are going to have a son. You are 99 and up. And now Abraham, when I use this passage, I'm fully aware that it's much easier in the male-female kind of dynamic about children for the male to say, oh, sure, right? We'll have another kid. Well, whatever. I always joke with my wife. I'm like, let's have a 4th, honey. And she's like, right. I'm like, I'm just kidding. But, so I fully aware. But Abraham, the thing we get from Abraham in this telling is that Abraham, when the strangers show up to tell them, he gives the best of what he has, right? He gives the best calf and the bread and the grain, the shade, the water. Of course, he makes everybody else go out and prepare it. But in essence, he says, you're asking us to do this crazy thing after we've already followed you. Okay, we're going to give you more, right? And Sarah has about the best reaction I can imagine. If my wife is about 3 years older than me, so she's almost 48. If we were told by some angel, some vision, you are going to have a child, right? Sarah laughed. There would be no laughter in our household. We would eventually get to, oh, God's blessing. We would eventually get to that. But at the initial outset, there isn't like, ha, ha, ha. It's like, are you kidding me? I mean, it'll be like, so God is not done with you. So if you get to this point where you kind of have said, I just can't learn that, that's a young person's thing. There's two things wrong with that. That means that you're saying that there is no way God speaks through some of this stuff I'm going to share with you, and that you have no part in it, which means that God is done with you, which means you better watch out, because when God's actually done with you, that is our last breath. The second thing is technology and social media is a partnership between young and old, new and old, all of those things. When we start to begin to believe that technology and social media is just for young people, we've done a disservice to this gift that we have been given in our world. It's kind of like saying singing is only for people who sound good or who are trained, or that preaching is only for X, or there's no only for when we talk about this, but we default into how we kind of set each other up, young and old, when we talk about these kind of technologies. In our last session, I'm going to talk about youth and young adults and how we set each other up to fail in denominations a little bit. So, all right, so we're going to dive in now. Oh, wait, pause. Oh, we're going to watch this video now. All right. So I share that with you because I want you to go, oh, good Lord, I hope the church doesn't get to that. All right? Because that's not really what we're about. I show that because I think it's important to see the breadth and extent of what is out there so that some of this other stuff I'm going to actually talk about doesn't seem that crazy. Thinking. I used to do that in worship all the time. The church that I used to pastor, where our worship seemed weird to people, but I'm like, well, go take them over here first. That's crazy. And then take them to us, and then we don't seem that bad. So I share that because it's also one of those things that the reality is outside of most denominational worlds, things are moving at a much faster pace. Now, sometimes we like to embrace that. We're more diligent and discerning. Other times we're just not keeping up. And finding that sweet spot for ourselves about how much we need to kind of move forward and embrace some technologies, embrace new ways of communicating, and how much we need to kind of step away from it. We can't figure that out unless we actually know what we're looking at. And so I'm one of those that wants to talk about why does this work? Why doesn't it work? And then so you can begin to discern that for yourself in your communities. Okay. I'm going to move on. I might have all right, but quickly, I want to know, raise of hands, how many of you use email? All right, you can kind of look around if you want. How many of you, I keep clicking over here. That's not where the computer is. How about that? How many of you text? Okay. Anything Google? They're taking over the world. Facebook? All right, Twitter? It usually starts to get a little lower at this point. Pinterest? All right. YouTube? Okay. Skype? Yep. Instagram? Come on. That's my happy place. All right. Dropbox? Good. Foursquare? The true geeks in the house. Seriously? There you go. The tech guy behind the computer. You and I, we're checking in. All right. That's always happens, and we're proud of it. We're like, yes, we do this. And when I tell you about it, you're going to be like, why do you guys do that? I'm like, I don't know. All right. Just to give you a little sense, this is last year, September 13, about where people are. And this is you'll see Google Plus there. How many of you Google Plus? Any of you? Yeah, see, there's two worlds around this. Some say that Google is abandoning Google Plus and they're kind of giving up on it. Others say no, they're funneling everyone to Google Plus. I think it's just a thing to keep your eye on. My kids use it a little more than I do, which is an interesting kind of thing. But you'll just notice there are a lot of people. If anybody ever says social media, people aren't using it, you're hanging out with a very small set of people, right? Because look at the hands that were raised about what you all do in this room. Now, you're going to use different things, which I'll talk about in a minute and why, but just to give it a sense, this is not something that's a fad. Like, you're not going to I'm just going to wait out the internet. You could, I suppose, but how will you find where to go to movies? No. Okay. So let me give you some assumptions real quick. And again, I am going to just run through these, and I'm around for today and tomorrow. We're going to keep talking. I just want to make sure that you know social media is just another means of communication. Do not idolize it. Do not give it power over. It is just an expression, just as singing, a choir, an organist, a preacher, a liturgist. These are ways we express ourselves, and as we know, they can be used for good or for not so good, right? Social media certainly can lean itself towards being a little bit narcissistic because it is about sharing who we are, but I always think about, I've met organists, right? The first organist that I worked with, lovely gentleman, but he and I battled all the time, and it wasn't helpful when I first got out of seminary. One of the first things I said to him, I said, it sounds like we're at a carnival when you play that. Not probably very helpful, right? I'm sure that wasn't at all. But, so it just got worse, and it became not about worship. It became about him and me, right? So any of these things can be used badly. Generational error, again, we never should say only old people, only young people, whatever, use this. But we'll say it does give a sense of how a generation grows up and the culture in which they do that. I often will tease my middle child who's very much on social media, and she'll do something, and I'm like, oh, you're such a digital native. And she'll say, what's that? And I say, that's how old people talk about you. But there is truth to that, right? Her world is a world that I moved into during high school. She was born into it, and it just lives in it. So it's not a strategy. It's not something she had to take a class on. It's just something that's part of her being. That doesn't mean she uses everything or likes everything, but it does mean that it's part of a worldview in which she grew up. Highly contextual. You're going to embrace it at a different level. Social media demands a high sense of self-worth. When you're on social media, on Twitter or on Facebook, nobody cares what office you hold or what degrees you have. Right? When I was moderator of the Presbyterian Church USA, people would leave stuff on my Facebook page all the time or something, and there would be times I'd be like, do you know who I am? Like if a seminarian smarted off to me on Facebook, I'd be like, dude, I can control your world later on, which I can't. But what that did was it said in many ways, we don't care that you're a moderator. My relationship with you is because of how you interact in this medium. And that's how you earn your authority. And so it flattens all of that. I know too many pastors who expect people to interact with them simply because they're pastors. Or expect everybody to read them because I'm the pastor and you'll read my blog. Well, no, that's not true. All right. The last thing is most important on that list is the assumptions. Social media will not save anything. If you are a church, there's somewhere in the back of your head that I'm sure has said, if we just get our webpage better, more young people will come. That is not going to happen. If that's the only motivation is about saving an organization, it's not going to happen. A nonprofit, any organization, community group, whatever, if you believe that if we just do this one thing, then it's going to save us, you've taken the legs out of why social media is so important and powerful. All right, going on. All right, here's the dangers. Yeah, this is the best picture I've ever found, actually. So if you can't see that, it says feed a pigeon, lose a finger. I've never actually seen a pigeon attack. But certainly something must have happened at this location where somebody lost a finger. It's not funny, I know, but it's kind of funny because they made a sign about it. Anyway, pitfalls, here we go. Social media is savior. I talked about that a little bit. It is not. Social media is distraction. I don't know if any of you ever sat down at your computer and 3 hours later you're like, what did I just do? Where did that time go? Right? It can be a distraction, but not just in your time. Sometimes social media, if you have conflict going on in one part of your life, that is an easy escape. And I don't think it's bad for short periods of time, but when it becomes a way that you are not facing things going on in another part of your world that have to be dealt with, that's when it is not healthy. Whether it's relationships or it's a church conflict, you can find refuge often in social media, which is helpful, but it can be a distraction. It can lead to that. Careless expression. I don't know how many of you have ever fired off some kind of smart aleck comment about some politician. Somebody does something stupid. You put it out there. What an idiot. Gosh, what a moron. No. That is not the way we should be using this. Right? None of us are as smart or as witty as we probably think we are. My mother taught me that. My mother is a Presbyterian minister as well, though she went to seminary after me. So I joke around that I'm a pastor's kid with all of the glory and none of the baggage. So, but my mom would often say to me, so I'm a big Oakland A's fan, baseball, and so our arch rival are the New York Yankees. We just hate the Yankees, and they have a player, Alex Rodriguez, who has been suspended because of steroid use, and everybody hates A-Rod. We call him A-Rod. And I would always vent about him, like, A-Rod sucks, I hate him, da-da-da-da. And my mom would always say, you know he has a mother. And I would say, and she's probably taking the juice too, right? But my mom would always try to remind me that part of, not as a pastor, but part of our calling as human beings is to see the child of Godness in everyone. It doesn't mean you have to agree or affirm or all that, but it does mean that we don't go out intentionally to strip people of their humanity. And oftentimes social media leads to some careless expression of that. All right, keep going. Dun, dun. Overestimated return on investment. That means that you tell a youth group leader, okay, you can go build a website, and then a year later you say, how come the youth group's not bigger? Right? You could go ahead and do this thing. I'm going to get on Twitter, and if worship attendance doesn't improve in a year, I'm going to get off. Right? Those are not hopeful mechanisms for us to think about it. So we don't want to see this as a return on investment. As an echo chamber, sometimes we can get into social media circles. I've seen pastors do this. They get out of a really bad session meeting or a board meeting, and they come onto Twitter and they complain about how awful the lay people are. And all the pastors in that group say, yeah, they are. I'm sure it was all their fault. No, you had nothing to do with it, right? Now, sometimes we need that community, but sometimes that turns into an echo chamber where we hear that and we begin to believe it, and then we live that out in real life. Well, my community, that's when you say, they say that I was right. Who's they? Well, all the people that I follow on Twitter. Right? So you create this echo chamber that you don't want. Social media is over and above face-to-face. Every time, I'm sure I'll get into this conversation with you, social media and technology and all this will never replace face-to-face interaction. That is the wrong dichotomy for us to have. We shouldn't no longer think about this as either or. This really is a both and-ish kind of relationship. The two reasons is this. One is, when we do that, we make an assumption about our face-to-face interactions. If your churches are anything like mine, when we say face-to-face is always better than virtual, what you are saying is that when you get together on Sunday morning, those relationships that are face-to-face are always good. That they're in-depth, they're meaningful, they're spiritual, whatever. And I know in my home congregation, there's stuff going on all kinds in that church. That we got together on Sunday and we were face-to-face, but that didn't mean those relationships were any better. Just as I would say, virtual relationships aren't necessarily always just these kind of surface-level interactions that I think so many people have. There are communities that meet every week, especially those who are homebound or limited by geography, that just meet online, and they will never meet face-to-face. There's a UCC congregation in Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln? They're in Omaha. Called Darkwood Brew. Have any of you ever gone to a Darkwood Brew worship service? You know they're there? Okay. There's one. Darkwood Brew only meets online. They have a small community at this little church, and Eric Elness is the pastor, and it's filmed and webcast, and they bring somebody in like me or someone. We give a little bit of a 5-minute talk, and then there's interaction, and then they pray. They're in silence, and then they say, we're going to give you a few minutes to go gather your elements and then come back and we're going to have communion. And so everybody scuttles around their kitchen and brings it back in front of their computer screen. Eric says the words and we all have communion. It's an amazing experience. I am never going to meet most of the people there. And that's done digitally. So that's a danger, is to create this dichotomy. They enhance each other, both have good and bad. The last thing is this, the last danger, which I think is most important for us as church leaders. Social media is an entry to bullying and unwanted interactions. In the U.S., suicide rates have continually been rising in our young people. Many of us believe that it's because of the rise of technology and digital media. Now, you can decide we're going to get rid of digital media and technology. That is one option. You can decide your children are never going to have any of that stuff. That is also another option. I am much more of a, let's figure out how to use this well and equip our children and our young folks to make good choices and be able to interact in a world that is going to be filled with digital media and social media for their lives. What happens is, when I was young and I had a bully, Patrick Uke, I could avoid him at school, I could take different hallways, and then I would leave school and I would get home and I would regroup. I would figure out how I'm going to get through that, whatever it was, but I had this break and I knew that nothing was going on. Now what happens is something happens at school, they come home, and they know somewhere else somebody is possibly talking about them. Even if it's not happening, it could be. Even if my daughters turn off all of their technology and take a break from their particular space, in their head, they know that if there's drama going on, it's still going on. And that constant barrage again, is something we have to figure out a way to be engaged in a way that helps our young folks kind of move through that world. I think we can learn a lot from them in that, but I think this is where the church has to provide some skills and some time and space to be able to work with that danger. Okay? All right. Now some good things. Yeah, pictures are so fun for me. Social media can build up the body of Christ. I have no doubt. I have seen too much around social media and technology that have said that we are stronger because we've interacted over this medium. The way that people gather around crisis, the way that people, that's not just, it's in prayer, but it's not just that, it's how do you do resources, all these kinds of things that happen through these new mechanisms builds up what we are trying to do in sharing, speaking, and living the gospel. Allows the church to model a different way of being. If you follow me on Twitter or on Facebook, you get a lot of stuff that you could care less about. Right? There's going to be things, I'm going to talk about my dog, I'm going to talk about the Oakland A's, I'm going to talk about crazy stuff. And some of that you are like, oh, that's interesting. Otherwise, it's like, what does he do all day? But we get to do the same thing, right? We get to, as churches, we get to see the world differently, but we also get to live in the world differently. When your friends know that you're a church person and you get some nasty comment or you see something directed towards you, how you respond, fair or not, reflects your understanding of how you are to live in the world. Right? So if I smart off to someone, they're like, huh, is that the way, Bruce, I know as a person, as a pastor, is that the way we should respond? The church has this great opportunity to respond differently in the world. I'm playing games. All right. I got to go faster than this. There's some other things in there. I'll do the other one. Offers a place of communal care and spiritual renewal. I really do think that we have great possibilities with using social media and technology as a way to interact around our spirituality. Yesterday's worship service with the texting of things, I think that was a great idea. There's lots of stuff out there about how to integrate some of this. One example, the church that I was at, we used to give out the worship themes a couple weeks ahead of time and tell people, could they just go do quick, like 10-second videos of things they saw, and then we would show those during worship as scripture was being read so that folks were interacting with it. The other thing that often churches do is they do prayer chains and prayer groups. I think those are invaluable kinds of ways to connect and use those online. All right. A couple postures I want to make sure that you think about as before you're getting into all this stuff, if you're going to dive in. I think be with people. Again, just kind of dive in with stuff. Again, you're not going to break the internet. Be appropriate. If you're not willing to share it in real life, don't share it online. It's a very simple rule. Oversharers online are probably oversharers in person. Right? So I'm oftentimes in person, I'm with, wow, did you mean to say that out loud? And so sure enough, the same people will do the same thing online. Just, kind of be appropriate with all that. Be mindful that most people lurk now. Most people do not. If you think about the ways that you interact online, how much stuff you actually comment on or engage with, you can get a sense. Most people now just look at stuff without ever interacting. So even when you put something out there and nobody responds to it, that doesn't mean that people aren't seeing it. And it also is a good reminder that, as my oldest child says to my middle child all the time when she's on Instagram and she's counting how many likes she gets, my oldest screams out, likes do not mean love. Right? So don't get caught up in how many likes you get, all that kind of stuff. Know that most people are just lurking. See, I go to my slide as soon as you fade me out. I'm messing with our video guy. And then be humble, be bold, which means that don't try too hard when you're online. We have a sense, especially word people, we want to craft every Facebook update that's theological. We want to craft it so that it's beautiful and meaningful, and gosh, people are going to want to use it in worship. Like, don't do that, because we can tell when you've tried too hard. At the same time, when you're feeling God move in you and you want to put something out there, be bold about it, because you never know where that goes. That could be sharing content, or it could be your own thoughts. And lastly, Do you have an equivalent of National Public Radio in Canada? CBC, okay. So National Public Radio in the U.S., this is their model. They'll share 6 stories. 5 of them will not be about a pledge, right? It will not be about a pledge. It will not be about them as a radio station. It will be content that their listeners are interested in, and who have given their trust to NPR to curate, to suss out, and say, this is information that you may want to know about. Churches are horrible at this. If anything, we do it the other way. Oh, here's something that's happening in the neighborhood. Now you need to come to potluck. Don't forget that you need to give. Pick up your envelopes in the back. Da-da-da. Everything else is about us. Flip that on the other side. If you believe you're curating, you're sharing information, the more you share about information that you think your members are interested in, and they trust you to kind of discern that so they don't have to do that, share 5 of those things, and then you've earned the right to ask that last one. Right? So you can say, hey, this is happening in the community. Hey, did you know this is happening in Africa? Oh, this is happening in our urban setting. You may want to be engaged in that. And then the last one says, oh, and don't forget, potluck is this Sunday. I guarantee you they'll look at that potluck announcement more than they would have ever looked at it before. So flip that on the other side. All right. We're going to keep going. Now, there are lots of things out there. See, this is where I start showing my age. How many of you actually know who those people are? I love denominations these days, right? That's kind of where we're a little older. It's all right. So these are the Coneheads, right? This is Saturday Night Live. They're really smart. There's a lot of terms up there that you've probably seen and know. My dad is a classic example of having the right words but having no idea how to put them together or what they mean, right? I've done that. You've all at some point done that. I'm like, I've heard on the Facebook, you tweet this. I'm like, no, that's not quite right. But there's lots of stuff out there. I'm just going to lift up a few of them that you want to make sure you kind of look at. How many of you have a smartphone? How many of you have a dumb phone? Yeah, see? That's always the response. Mine's dumb. Well, they're not all. So smartphones, right? Those are ones that it usually has some kind of face on it. You can put apps on it and all those kind of things. So a lot of people are headed towards, but not a requirement. How many of you have a tablet of some kind? An iPad, a Nexus? Okay. Great. Okay, so those are some of the hardware pieces you're using. What the world is coming to is that you are going to be able to access all of your world and your information through your phone or your tablet or your computer. The vast majority of the world, if you have been doing your reading, are on mobile devices now. When the U.S., we are way behind for the main purpose is that our technology is based on actual wires. And so we're behind places like Haiti and the Philippines and Korea and Africa because they're wireless. Which is, I go to the Philippines once a year, and they're more wired than San Francisco is. Because you can go everywhere, and we're not tied to the wires. So what that means is this thing called cloud technology. So some of you, people will say, oh, just put it in the cloud. And if you don't know what that is, you're like, oh, okay, where is that? So cloud technology, all that really means, again, I'm not a techie, I'm more social media person, but so when you think about a cloud, right, it's up in the sky, I just pretend that's this lovely Google Vault in Nevada somewhere. And you put all your information up there, and then you can get it from your phone or your computer or your tablet, and you can just access it. That's, for those of you who use Dropbox, right, that's what you're basically doing. You're putting it all up here, and then you can get it in any place that you have some kind of connection. Now, what I say about that is only put things in the sky, in the cloud, that you're willing to lose. Right? Always have multiple copies. Always back up your computers. I know that people sometimes don't back up their computers. Back up your computers, because you only will not do that until the first time that you lose everything. And two things will happen. You'll lose really important documents, and you'll be really hurting. Or you realize how much we do that doesn't actually matter if we lose it. Right? Could be both ways. All right, the last thing I want to just lift up there is this other thing here. How many of you have been seeing those a lot around? Yeah? 2 years ago, I used to do workshops on social media, and I'd say, those aren't going to be around. So there you go. You can believe whatever I say today, and you can say, well, he was wrong about QR codes. So QR codes, all that stands for, very technical, quick read codes. That's all the QR stands for. And what that is, those are just barcodes on steroids. So barcodes, right? You scan a barcode, it gives you a price. This you scan and you can make it go to anything. A picture, a phone number, a website, anything that you can get to online. So what that means is you can create those, never pay for it. There's always free kinds of things, ways you can do it. A couple of the things that churches are doing, a lot of churches are now using that in their bulletins to go to a giving site, right? So if you want to give offering, scan that, takes you right to it. You can give online. The other thing, our church in San Francisco, I go to a small little church in San Francisco that's very not up with technology, which I love. It's so much fun playing with them. And what we're going to try to do, the pastor and I, we said, we're going to try this. There's about 10 or 15 people that really like the technology there. So starting in the fall, what we're going to try to do is have the bulletin as a QR code. So when you come in, you just scan it. It pops up on your phone or your tablet, and now you just have your bulletin with all the music, and the announcements will go home with them. That's how I got to my pastor. I'm like, they'll take the announcements home. Oh, okay. So yeah, so now we're going to see if we can start printing less bulletins and kind of we're doing both, right? But that's one of the ways that we're playing with it. All right, I am going to run out of time. Okay, lots of stuff. This is the picture of my phone. You know, as you begin to think about how you use this technology on your phone, you start to put the things that matter on the front page or on the second one. So I play Scramble. That's my fun thing I do. There's all kinds of stuff on there. Whenever I show the slide the night before, I'm like, I better make sure that I don't have anything on there I don't want people to see. I don't think I have anything like that, but, you know, technology always be like, oh, wow, I didn't mean to do that. So that's my front page. There's all kinds of things you can use. Some of you may use some of these. You know, some of you blog and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of blog services. Again, you're going to download these slides. I would begin to look at a lot of photo stuff you may want to look at, and video as well. Not many of you are on Instagram, but in the U.S., that's where most of the young folks are. That's where middle schoolers, high schoolers, that's a good place. The reason is it is a place that is pretty anti-spam and link prone. You can't leave links in Instagram. It's really just about pictures, a comment, and interaction. It's kind of stripped it all away. So it's a really good place to be if you want to follow what's going on. Video, obviously, is going. Is Vine big in Canada? I didn't look up the stats on that. Vine, okay. So my middle kid loves Vines. I mean, they're obnoxious to me sometimes because they're 6X, but they play them all the time, over and over again. And I've never made a good one. That's probably why I don't like it. I keep trying. I'm like, I got a great Vine. Let's do it. And she'll record, and then Abby will say, nope. I'm like, oh. All right, so some other ones there that you'll be able to see, and then I want to give you some top ones that you need to look at. So let me see. So location stuff, these are actually going on the wane, unfortunately. So location-based ones, so Foursquare, there's two of us in the room that use Foursquare. So you get somewhere, and whenever I explain this, it never makes it sound any cooler at all. So you get somewhere, and I put on my Foursquare thing, and it says, check in at the arena. So I check in, and anybody I'm connected with on Foursquare, they know where I am. See, everybody was like, yeah, why do you do that? It's just another way to interact. There are a couple things that happen sometimes. There are a lot of restaurants that are now using that as a way to give discounts and coupons. You check in at a mall, you can get yogurt at one of the malls near us. You get yogurt for $1. There's lots of that kind of stuff going on. But the usage of Foursquare is declining. So at some point, that's going to go away. All right. Now, let me give you a few areas that you're thinking about your social media worlds and the way that I look at them. The first one is this: social media, things that are about connecting people. That's the primary way that we've used social media stuff, right? Building community, connecting with each other, all that kind of stuff. Coordination, so those are organizational. Those, I think, are the most important ones. I'm going to give you two in a minute. Those are the ones that help us do our work and our ministry with a little more proficiency to free us up for other things. Curation, gathering information and sharing it. Right, very simple, but really, I think of it as preaching almost. What I gather and discern and share out with the community is important. Communication: how do you message and deliver that message out? Creativity: unleashing artistry. I think that is an untapped resource for many, especially denominations, that our general history has not been about creativity, that building institutions generally isn't about creativity. And so I think we have this vast ability, this well to tap into. And then contemplation, how do you engage in some some prayer and things. All right, so I'm going to give you 10 really quickly. Facebook, most of you are already on it. You know, some people say, gosh, all the young people are leaving Facebook. That is absolutely true. My 13-year-old daughter just turned 13. When my 17-year-old daughter, 13, the best gift we have ever given her was, okay, now you can open up your Facebook page, right? You can start, and like, woo! My 13-year-old is like, do I have to? Really? And I'm like, can you please? Like, I had like, your people are like, her family wants her to be on Facebook, but she had no inkling. And her friends, they're not all on Facebook. When before, my older child, 4 years earlier, all of her friends lied to be on Facebook early. What we discovered when Abby just got on about a month ago, most of her friends were not on it, and very few people lied about their age to get on Facebook. So when you hear it's getting older, that is true. That doesn't mean we avoid it, though, because still a vast majority of this room is on Facebook. And people are still using it to some extent. And it's not going away anytime soon. All right, let me keep going. Twitter, oh, my bad. So Twitter was one that it did say that the largest demographic growing is our grandparents, which is true. Another demographic that is growing are actually young people. The folks that aren't using it as much are the people right in the middle, the ones that really started it. So it's beginning to really shift. Twitter people used to say it's just for Xers, and what we're finding out is it's much broader now. That Twitter is happening much broader. Twitter is not going to be for everyone. Not everybody's going to get it or want to get it, but you can use that in a lot of good ways, creating lists, connecting with people, finding out what's happening in your community. YouTube, get on YouTube. If you produce any videos or you create them in your community, make sure that you're putting them on YouTube. Some of you will want to put them on Vimeo, which is a cooler, for filmmakers, Vimeo is the one that looks better and it's kind of hipstery looking. But I always tell my friends, I'm like, do you want people to see it? Or do you want people just to go to it and say it looks cool on this player? And filmmakers, like, I want them to think it's cool on this player. And so they'll do that. But Vimeo is good if you're going to also not make it public so you can share it with people. If you want people to find stuff and if you want to find things, YouTube is the place to be. Okay, so you don't feel, you know, this is kind of our new place to find sermon material, to find reflections that people have done, to find prayers. If you want to show video for scripture, you can probably put any scripture in YouTube and find somebody who's done a video on it. Now, they may not all be good. They may be cheesy as all get out, but there's opportunity for you to kind of use that. Instagram, I think this is an amazing way to see into the lives of people without them being worried that you're going to be asking to do something all the time. Look, you can see into the world of a middle schooler or a high schooler. You can interact at that level. It's not at all about some of this other stuff where it's, can you come to this? There's no invites. There's no link sharing. It's just seeing in each other's worlds a little bit. GroupMe. Any of you use GroupMe? All right, so GroupMe, I'm going to give you two that are hopefully going to help your day. So GroupMe is this. For those of you that text, GroupMe, what you do is you go and you sign up and you create an account. GroupMe is just starting in Australia now, and nobody uses it? All right, I think it's in Canada. I should have checked that. If anybody's online, if you could check to make sure GroupMe is in Canada. GroupMe and things like this create group texting messages so that if you have to text a bunch of people at one time, they're not all getting a single text from you and then texting you back. It shows up as one conversation on your phone. So as a family, we use this, right? So if I were to text right now, can somebody look up whether GroupMe is in Canada? My whole family gets that. Somebody looks it up. They text back to that group, and it shows up, Dad asked this, Evelyn answered this, da-da-da, so you don't have this confusion. It's great for families. It's great for youth group parents. So if you have a parent group, you can say, we're arriving in 20 minutes. That goes out to everyone. And then a parent can say, oh, I'm stuck over here. can somebody pick up Jimmy? That goes back, and everybody sees it so that you can have this conversation. The best part about it is when you call GroupMe and you request it, you can turn it into an instant conference call system, where it means staff use this, I know, for churches, where they will say, something happened. You dial a number, and it immediately rings everybody's phones. And you have an instantaneous conference call. So that's GroupMe. All right. Mad Mimi, some of you, how many of you do electronic newsletters? Electronic newsletters, really? Okay. That's okay. I'm not a big believer in them, actually. So there's always a debate. You go from paper newsletters to electronic newsletters. The debate is, well, are people going to read them? Are they reading them anyway? That's always the question I ask. And how do you know? What happens if you go to electronic is you can save some money. That is true. And it's faster, right? But the thing with electronic newsletters is you get a lot of statistics back, and the biggest thing you find out when you go to an electronic newsletter is you find out how many people never read your newsletter. So you'll send out 1,000, and you'll find out, 200 people even opened the email. So I actually am one that says do both, because I actually read the paper newsletter I get from my home church, right? And as I look at my email, the way that I interact, I will read a new newsletter once or twice, and then eventually it starts fading from my view. And that's often what happens with newsletters. All right. Buffer. Buffer is a great app where if you are one that, you have friends that are on Facebook, and all of a sudden it's like boom, 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 boom. They put out all this information, and so you don't read it all. You may read the first one or the last one, or if you're on Twitter and somebody's like, they were up at midnight and they just found all this information, they wanted to share it. What Buffer does is Buffer allows you to save some time. If you want to share some information about your church throughout the week, you can set what Buffer is. It's like a cup. And you want to send out 5 announcements over 5 days. On Monday, you put all 5 of them in the cup. You set the times to go out, and Buffer just drops them into your social media places when you set them. And you can just keep throwing things in that cup, and no matter how many times you have set to go out, it will go out. For instance, if you're following me on Twitter, I am tweeting as this whole day goes on. Because last night, I put 12 updates in my Buffer, and throughout the day, those are being dropped into my Twitter stream. And so what that does is it makes it so that in the morning, they don't just get boom, 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 boom. It's spread out throughout the day so folks see it. It saves you a lot of time in your social media world and life. Dropbox, some of you are already using Dropbox. One of the best things for Dropbox are meetings like this. I was very, very excited to see. I got an email that said, here's all your documents. Download them from Dropbox. It's great. It's wonderful that many of you are using it. I think you just use it more to keep information. For those of you that use presentation slides, it's a great resource for worship, where you put your presentation slides in Dropbox, and everybody that has to add things to it can just edit them there. You can pull them back down on Sunday and use them from there, and not everybody has to be tied to one computer. All right, Doodle. Do any of you use Doodle? Yes. See, people use Doodle like, yes, and I wish more of you would use it. So have any of you ever been the person that's on the email that says, okay, I'll help coordinate the date? So you send out to 5 people that say, hey, when are you available? And then 5 people say, I'm available Thursday from 9:30 to 11. Another one says Friday from da-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da. And then you say, okay, it looks like Thursday at 12 is when we can meet. Well, inevitably, you missed somebody's note that said, I can't be there at 12, and you just picked that date so I wouldn't be at that meeting. Now, that may be true, but it leaves all the power in the person who's picking the date. Doodle, what you do is you set 5 dates on a little chart. It's very simple. You send it out to people. They click on a link, and they see those 5 dates, and they have 3 choices: yes, no, and basically, if I have to. Now, what happens is they see that starting to go out, and it becomes clear that you didn't decide you were keeping so-and-so out of this meeting. They were just the only person out of those 5 people that checked no. And so it becomes more of a group source decision rather than you, because you don't want to have that kind of power. You may want to. It's not good for you to have that kind of power all the time. It's more important for the group to share that. A quick note about that, if you ever get a doodle poll, answer quickly, right? Because you set the tone, right? Because I'm more apt, if I'm the fifth person and everybody can go on this one day and I'm like, I really wanted to go see a movie that day, I'm probably going to say, okay, fine, I can go, right? But if I can't do that, then, you know, if nobody's there, then I'm going to go to a movie. All right, last one. Pinterest. Have you used Pinterest? All right, Pinterest is one of the only social media sites that's predominantly women. And some of that is because how it started. It was crafts, weddings, recipes, all of those kind of generic things. But now it's much broader, and more folks are using it. And for church circles, worship planning is amazing on Pinterest. If you have a Lent service coming up, season coming up, you tell folks, this is the theme. I want you to go out and find pictures, prayers, whatever, and post them to this church board. It's an amazing way to get people engaged in things. If you do church school, there's lots of curriculum that's on Pinterest. You just have to search for it. It's very easy to find. Lots of things have done amazing lots of people have done amazing things on Pinterest. All right, I've used all my time up, and my buzzer's going off. So I was supposed to go until 11:45, right? Yes. So we don't really have time for table talk, huh? No. So go do 5 minutes of Q&A? Okay. I keep looking over. So, questions. These are questions here that if you wanted to meander about at some point, that would be fine, but let me turn that off. All right. Questions about any of this stuff? I told you it's like drinking from a fire hose. No? Yes, go for it. Just yell, and I'll repeat. So she said she used to work as a computer specialist, and you should always tell customers, Jesus saves, so should you. Which is very true. I save 3 times. I back up in the cloud. I have an external that I have at home, and I have an external that I bring with me when I travel. Just because, and it's mostly about my pictures. I just don't want to lose pictures and that kind of stuff. All right, other questions, thoughts, comments? Yep.
Well, you mentioned, you talked about your SlideShare here.
Yep.
You mentioned using SlideShare, which I use do Bible studies and send it out.
Okay.
Sorry. SlideShare. Whoa.
SlideShare, share.
Sorry.
Yeah, so mention that SlideShare about mine, and using it in other things. So I haven't seen many folks use SlideShare very well in pastoral contexts, and that would be it's mostly for now some people do that and will teach using that, so that is certainly another place. I haven't done a lot of it, but I haven't seen a lot of folks use it very well in terms of church work. But so SlideShare is basically, if you go to my SlideShare, you can just follow along this presentation online, and so a lot of people maybe do a class, and so people can just follow along. So yeah, it's certainly a great resource, untapped. Yes, sir. The microphone at number 2.
I'm always appalled by the public comments on news sites, including the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, on how vitriolic some people are about what's happening. I think it's partly because many of them are anonymous. But I've read that sometimes the first person that comments sets the tone for what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think this is an opportunity for us to try and be the first and say something positive or constructive to influence the public debate. What do you think about that?
And I think that's a great. There are a couple ways to interact online. Now I'm a kind of a public person, so I write and blog a lot about gun control in the U.S. and I will talk about sexuality stuff. And so that just draws people into these fights. The other thing that we model is disengagement. I think one of the things that I've tried to really craft over my time is how to say to somebody, I think we're at a place where we can no longer have this conversation, and have the willingness to step out of it, because I think we want people to understand us and to eventually come to agreement. And the reality is there are people that are never going to understand us, or they do understand us and they're just never going to agree with us. And so if I can get somebody to acknowledge that I'm being faithful, that's where I try to get to. But I also think there are times where we model positive interaction, but we can also model that you don't have to engage every person that engages with you online, because there are a lot of trolls out there that try to just get you going. And part of part of the thing we teach, right, is discernment and restraint. And how do we model that as well? So I think that's great. Start off early. I also, reading the comments, if you know you're one that your blood boils when you read comments, don't read comments. But if you're one that actually, I'm like, I need to know kind of the stuff that's out there, and I want to know how people are interacting, and I don't let it get to me, then I go ahead and read them. All right, I think I'm being told to get off. All right, thank you all. We'll see you this evening. Thanks.